3 to 1, episode 173. I'm super happy to start this episode today with somebody I was wishing to chat a long time ago. We met by chance last year when we were both waiting for good weather in South Georgia. I was on board Golden Fleece and he was on board Vinson of Antarctica, going to different locations, but we were lucky to see each other, to meet. So thank you so much, Skip, for accepting my invitation, and welcome to Mara Sonora podcast.
Thank you.
Do you speak any Portuguese at all?
No, not really. Just a few salutations, but no. Better do it in English.
I was going to tell you the meaning of Mara Sonora podcast. It's something related to resonant tide is the closest meaning. So it's a show about inspiring stories somehow related to the oceans. And I'm very happy you said yes to my humble invitation.
Okay.
And Skip, not everyone here are sailors. Like this podcast has different audiences. Of course, sailors, but people interested in stories connected to the ocean. And I thought, if you don't mind, because I imagine you have been asked this question 1 billion times already, but how does a Chicago-born freshwater pirate turns into a Southern Ocean explorer? What can you tell about yourself for the listeners?
Well, being from Chicago, and from a sailing family, my dad had sort of a few different iterations of sailboats, and I grew up at the yacht club during the long American summer holidays, from a very early age. So I've always been around boats and around the water. And, during those long summers when I was a teenager, I actually lived down at the harbor on the north side, Belmont Harbor, and had a little business with my other sailing mates down there where we were, taking care of boats during the week and washing them and cleaning them, getting them ready for the weekends. And that was our, professional life at the age of 14, 15, doing these things and living on the boats all summer. I'm not sure what our parents thought we were doing, but in the day, it was a very, liberal upbringing and a lot of trust involved of just letting, fairly young kids on their own completely in the harbor, never wearing a life jacket. And I mean, you look back on it and it's almost unbelievable by today's standards of care and due diligence and risk aversion culture we live in. So, yeah, I was very lucky to have grown up like that. And I think that stood me in good stead for about the rest of my sailing career and gave me a window to travel, because being from Chicago is a great city downtown, but I was actually raised in the suburbs. And I knew from a very early age, due to my reading, I was a very avid reader of adventure stories and exploration and, Melville, Hemingway, Conrad, Stevenson, these type of authors, that I knew there was a big world out there. So, I wasn't going to be in Chicago long. So I bailed pretty early on.
And are you in the UK right now? Or where exactly are you speaking from?
Now I'm in the UK. Yeah, I wound up after sort of a stopping and starting education in university. I wound up in 2 universities in Illinois that didn't go very well, and then eventually finished in Florida. But at that time, I was working in a shipyard already, so I really wasn't part of university life. I was working as a rigger and fitter on the west coast of Florida. And in 76, a year after I graduated, racing up and down the east coast of the eastern seaboard and delivering boats in the Caribbean and all over the place at a very young age. I delivered a boat across to Europe in 76 in the summer and basically never went back to the States to live. I've been European based for all these years, and then spent 20 years in Cape Town as well, up to recently.
And I was there's a question that I would like to ask you, and maybe it might be considered very silly, but I consider a crime leaving a woman curious. So if you don't mind me asking this, it's about
Sure.
your name. It's about your name, Skip. So Novak is Polish origin, right?
Novak is Czech.
Czech. Okay.
Czech, yeah. And my dad came from a Czech family and my mother from a German family. And these were, the grandparents who I do remember were, immigrants coming over to America back in the beginning of the 20th century. So I remember the grandparents all spoke with broken European accents. And my name Skip comes from sailing, because my dad was a sailor. He was an architect, and we had a few boats, 22 square meter and a 40-foot racer cruiser later. And he used to call me as a little kid the skipper, and that evolved into Skip. And ever since I could remember, I think my kindergarten teacher called me James, which is my real name. But by the time I was in first grade, I was known as Skip. And, by every teacher and every other student, I was Skip from here on going forward. So, yeah, that's my moniker.
Yeah, I was exactly wondering that. Is it related to sailing because it comes from skipper? And then I said, no, I have to ask him.
Yeah. I mean, there's, Skip is sort of in America, it's not that uncommon. And I actually know an Australian, Skip Lissaman, who was an America's Cup sailor. He sailed with me on the Parmelia race down to Fremantle in 1979. So there's a few Skips around, not many, but
awesome.
yeah.
And Skip, speaking about because you are very, very known for participating in 4 Whitbread around the world races, and you've been racing many, many years. And then in the late 80s, you started business further south and further north. I was wondering, looking back when you were in the Whitbread that you had, I saw some interviews with you, and you mentioned you were checking the weather through Morse code, and now you have a boat with Starlink and all the internet available. How is it for you to deal with these changes? How do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, you take the technology that's on offer, that's useful to you, and you use it. I'm not a complete Luddite, although I am known for being fairly retro in that I don't accept every piece of technology that comes along, because I think that, if you overkill it, it clutters your life and it's a distraction to some basic core values that that I hold dear. And so you have to cherry pick the technology. And there's a great I don't know if you're familiar with Yvon Chouinard, who started the Patagonia clothing company years ago. He was a mountain climber and a surfer, and he wrote a great book called Let My People Go Surfing. He was one of the first CEOs of big companies who looked at flexible labor situations and workplace environments and things like that. And he was an environmentalist principally. And he had a great quote that said, "Look at every piece of technology, take the ones you really need and discard all the rest." And that's sort of where I come from. So yes, we use Starlink. We just put that on this year, and that is it's a game changer and absolutely essential on some of the trips we're doing down south, which is supporting film streaming services and also science projects. We did 2 big ones this last year. And these people have to be in touch, and they have to be downloading documents and all sorts of things. So you do need that capability. The negative part of that side of our business is when we take normal tourist clients down to Antarctica and South Georgia, again, Patagonia, Falklands, etc., is that if you leave it open the whole time, people like at home, they're on their phones and computers the whole time. And we experimented with this system on a Falkland charter last November, and we had it on the whole time. And the people actually said, it would have been nicer without this thing, or maybe just on an hour a day. So going forward, we're going to limit the use of it because it is a distraction going down to Antarctica, and people are sitting on their looking at their phone when an iceberg is going by, or there's a whale, breaching right next to the boat, and they're looking on their email, So you have to manage it. You have to manage these things. Otherwise, like we all know, we're all on I'm not on social media. I don't do any, but most people are. And it is a huge distraction. So I think, technology from that point of view is great. You have to keep pace with it, but you don't have to buy into every single thing that comes along. I mean, that's not me.
So there will be a sort of a rule on board, like a limitation to for the next voyages on Vinson or the other fleet, on the other boats with you guys.
Yeah, no, that's the plan, is to have it, turn it on maybe 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day at a certain time, maybe, during cocktail hour in the evening, or, who knows? We're still coming to grips with it, managing that thing, because it is a new thing. And, we did have, obviously, Inmarsat Fleet 500 on the boat, and Iridium Certus, which are two, huge, big, capable systems, but they're nothing like Starlink. So, we're going to take the Inmarsat off and just have the Starlink and then the Iridium as a backup. So, we're well covered for any eventuality in the backup system. And, but, you can see Starlink is probably going to put those two companies out of business overnight. I mean, why would you buy an Iridium Go system now, or why would you buy an Inmarsat system? You'd just be mad in terms of the cost of the hardware and the whole thing. And Starlink is, as long as Elon Musk continues to stay vertical and happy, that's the downside of Starlink. It's a one-man operation, and everybody's getting it. But it all depends on this one key man. So there is a risk in it.
I remember because I was on board Golden Fleece with Jerome, and then I had the mini Garmin, the first version, because I wanted to leave my husband the possibility to track, because he sails, so he was really keen. He gave me the device, so I had one, and Jerome was laughing, like, "What are you doing with this stuff? Are you telling where we are?" And then when I came on board Vinson, I saw so many, like all charging. I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. Some of the crew from Netflix had them on board, and I was like, "Oh, this is a collection of Garmin."
No, the InReach system. That's sort of, that was just pre-Starlink. So everybody had an InReach on board, linked to your phone with an app. And that was sort of, a pretty cost-effective system of how to stay in touch. And you're limited to 140 characters on a message, etc. But now with Starlink, you're on your own email address, and WhatsApp. So there's that. It's absolutely seamless, which didn't exist before with any Iridium-based system or Inmarsat system. So, it is a watershed event. You could put it that way.
Skip, talking about Pelagic Expeditions that you have been running since late 80s, if I'm not wrong, 87, right?
Yeah, 87, yeah.
So you started off with Pelagic, and then you had Pelagic Australis, Vinson, and now there will be a fourth, like a sister ship of Vinson. Is that right?
Yes, we're building a sister ship to Vinson that's going to be launched in June in Holland. And that's, both of these boats are owned by a Chilean colleague of mine, because I sold Pelagic Australis to Greenpeace just, sort of almost during the COVID year, as COVID was winding down. And I stepped onto Vinson, which was being built at the same time during COVID. And then, we went off to Svalbard straight away. So I had a very... I would say during the COVID years, while everybody else was struggling, we were doing really well on Pelagic Australis. We were based in Cape Town, going down to Marion Island and Gough Island on film and science teams. And then sold Pelagic Australis after 20 years in operation. And it was the right time to sell that boat. And then, of course, we were building Vinson at the same time. So I stepped off one boat and on the other seamlessly, and it was great. And Vincent, we've been running for 3 years now, doing really good projects actually. And now we're building a sister ship because we think we can keep 2 boats busy, and we have the ability to manage 2 boats. Where our headquarters is in Barcelona, and so I'm sort of the father mentor of that Vincent project. Was obviously involved technically on the design, the concept of it with Tony Castro, naval architect, and now my big responsibility with these 2 boats is really keeping them busy, with projects and managing those projects, facilitating them, making sure we have the correct crew on board depending on what we're doing, and taking an overview. So it's a comfortable position to be in at my advanced age, you would say.
And I remember the day we came on board to see the boat, to visit you guys and say hello. When we arrived, you were making pancakes. How does it work, this like a division of tasks on board? How does it work between you guys?
Well, we have a very different style for most of these charter boats, totally antithesis to a classic charter boat in, let's say, in the Mediterranean or Caribbean, where you have a crew that are serving the guests, and you're doing, all that type of thing. Whereas on our Pelagic thing, and we started this right from day one all those years ago, is that when guests come on board, and the guests could be visitors, they could be science team, they could be a film team, etc. We build one team straight away day one, and make it very clear, to pull all this project off, whatever that may be. The crew has to help the film team or science team, and entertain the visitors in that case, and they have to help us sail the boat, because otherwise you'd wear yourself out trying to do everything: cooking, cleaning, entertaining them, etc., driving them ashore. So everybody has to pull together, and it's a much more, for me, it's a happier ship, and everybody's in it together, and they all share all the duties as much as possible. And we don't make anybody do anything, but that ethos, when you come on board, it's infectious, and you get to the point, where at the end of a big meal, you have to fight to get in the galley to do the dishes. There's 3 people trying to get in there. You never have to ask somebody to, who's going to do the dishes tonight, clean up, and you never. They're always in there, trying to get in. So it does work, and I think that's one of our secrets on Pelagic, is to have this culture, and I think it's very successful.
And Skip, among, for example, you, Jerome, Dion, his son, and we could see the interaction, for example, giving waypoints, showing this and that, new updating on what you see and what you would like and recommend. How does it work among sailors in general? Do you normally exchange this sort of information? Or is this just because you are very close and you know each other for a long time, and Dion working with you for many years? How is it exactly?
Yeah, I mean, one sense, have to say, first of all, there's very few boats down there doing what we do, because it's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not so easy to run these boats in these environments in places like the Falklands and Tierra del Fuego and Ushuaia, with services. There's no marinas. There's no classic situations of service industries like you have in the Med or Europe or America. So you got to be pretty self-sufficient, and it's hard, but we've been there so long, we know how to do it. And there's a few of the guys who've been there, equally as long in the game, but we're very few. So we're very close, as you just said. I've known Jerome from the beginning, and various other people, and we collaborate, even though we're on one sense competitors trying to get these great projects. Quite often, if we're double booked, we flip it to the other guy. And, with no commissions or anything, it's basically just, I can't do it. Can you do it? And that's how it works. And it's a very collaborative environment. And, if somebody needs help, with anything, spare part or delivering something, or quite often I bring stuff over from Cape Town for these other boats who need a new sail or, whatever. I put it on Vincent and bring it over to Stanley and they pick it up. So yeah, we work together a lot, I have to say, and we're also, the ones who I work with are members of IATO, International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, which has the same sort of ethos between the ships and the yachts and things like that. So there's a lot of communication going on, which you really have to do in these environments. Let's say if you're competing for charters in the Med or Caribbean, you probably wouldn't be that collaborative because it is hardcore competition and a lot of competition, a lot of boats. So you tend to stick to yourself, So yeah. Yes,
and
it's
Skip,
nice. Right. Yeah.
Speaking about your cup of tea, I've seen sometimes some interviews when you mention that cruising for cruising is not really your type of what you like. Like you like something with purpose, especially if it has to do with mountaineering. Or I would like to listen about that. If you can.
There's a fashion now today with cruising people going around the world. Everybody's doing, YouTubes and people are living like that. They're living off the media side, the social media side, and going around the world, and that's great. And going from A to B, maybe not a fixed itinerary, but for me to cruise, I have no interest in cruising in that fashion without an agenda. I need to have a goal and, point me in the right direction and let's make a plan to do something, whether that be climbing mountains, which is one of my passions. One of the reasons I went down south and up north in the first place with boats, because that's sort of a unique thing, sailing to climb. Or, if it's a science project, that's what I really enjoy, or film streaming, supporting these professional people. They give me the job at hand and I help them achieve those goals. And that's what I really enjoy, being on a boat. But to cruise around, with a bit aimlessly, without really a fixed sort of goal in hand is really not me, I have to admit. So, yeah.
And I was wondering, the name Vincent of Antarctica, it tells a lot about the sort of the style of the company, because it's related to the mountain, to the highest mountain in Antarctica. Can I say that? Is it right to assume that?
Yes. Our owner, Nicholas Ibanez, he has climbed Mount Vincent. He's a mountaineer as well. And, that was his baby. He came up with the name Vincent of Antarctica. In the beginning, we thought it was a bit long-winded, but actually, like all these things, once you decide that's the name and then it grows on you, and it's quite nice, actually. And of course, we call it Vincent for short. And even in correspondence, when we're sending emails back and forth with all the team, it's a VOA, Vincent of Antarctica, VOA, an acronym. So, yeah, it works. Yeah, it's great. And the second boat now, we've just actually named it, and that's going to be Amundsen. Yeah.
Ah, all right. Okay.
Yeah.
And also, you have put the chronic on the suits, right? Like the jacket of the crew when they are on board. I've noticed that too.
Yeah, no, everything. This project is a bit of a step up from Pelagic Australis. We've got a lot more resource involved, and there's a lot of other aspects to the project other than the charter business. We're doing sail training for young Chilean people in Puerto Williams, because Nicholas, he also supports the sailing school in Puerto Williams called Sedina, which is an amazing facility. It's right across from the McCalvey. If anybody's been there, you'll know the McCalvey, where everybody ties up to in Puerto Williams. And across this little creek is this beautiful log cabin structure, very sophisticated, that was built by Nicholas, and they've got fleets of Oppies, lasers, 420s, and it's great. And this is just specifically for the kids in Port Williams, and these guys are sailing, guys and girls sailing all winter. I've got videos of them in snowstorms, sailing Appies in Port Williams. It's fantastic. And so we're helping out, training some of these aspiring young Chileans into bigger boats. So a lot of these, not a lot, but a few every year come across with us to Cape Town, learning how to handle a big boat and the maintenance and all the rest of it. And we're trying to bring them up to professional crew level. These are people in their late teens and early 20s. So we're doing a bit of that. And then we have the educational side. If you go on the Vincent website, there's a whole sort of educational side to it that's handled by people in Barcelona in the Spanish language mainly for Chile and Spain. So everything we do on Vincent and all our blogs we do, we make a point to have some educational content on those blogs in terms of geography, history, biology, the whole gamut of things we do to try to make that sort of transferable into the educational part. So what I'm saying is that Vincent is not just like Pelagic was a vessel of fortune chartering. It was a business, where Vincent is a business as well, but there's a lot more to it than what we did before. Yeah, it's more complicated, and I think very satisfying to me.
I'm very happy because I was planning to ask you this about this education sort of branch of Vincent. So you already answered. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So for me, it's sort of an evolution, starting out very basically with my little boat and going through Pelagic Australis and now these two big boats, and just managing as an overview and bringing up younger people into the frame, mentoring people as crew. It's great for me, without having to worry about the nuts and the bolts and the washers and the gaskets and the all that stuff, which I did for so many years. We've got, a bigger team now to deal with all the different aspects. And it's definitely more professional than I ever did before, no doubt.
Your first boat, Pelagic, was, you started thinking about building her when you were on the Whitbread, right? Like back in the 80s. So with other friends, do you still call on her? Where is she now?
Yeah, no, I did. That's absolutely right. That was sort of invented by the crew of Drum, two people, Phil Wade, a South African, and my oldest sailing friend from Chicago, Chuck Gates. We formed a 3-man partnership just at the end of that 85 Whitbread race. We actually talked about it on the last leg up from South America coming back to the UK. And another guy on board, Patrick Banfield, yacht designer, he says, well, I'll draw the boat for you for free and help you get it started. So it was a collaborative thing from 4 people from the Drum project. And we started like that because our idea was, I said to myself, look, I've done 3 of these around the world races, and, maybe it's time to do something else. And Phil Wade was the same. And we said, let's build our own boat. So we all put in equal share capital. And I was in charge of building the boat in Southampton. And then the concept was we each had a year on the boat. And of course, I went down to Antarctica my first year. And that's how it all started in that 87, 88 season. And then Phil had the boat after I gave it to him in Cape Town. And then he went off into the Pacific. And then Chuck took it over in New Zealand and stayed in that area. Then I had 2 years of the 4-year schedule because I was compensated with an extra year. So I took the boat again back down in 1991 to Antarctica, South Georgia, etc. And then after that, we had a formula. Are we going to do this again, or are we going to sell the boat? Or if 1 wants in, 2 out, or 2 in, 1 out? Had it all very well developed before we started this thing, all the different possibilities. And I was the only one who wanted to keep the boat because I saw this opportunity to start chartering down south and stay there, because once you go there once, you just scratch the surface of what's possible, because you've got Patagonia, South Georgia, Antarctic Peninsula, Falklands. It's a huge area, and I knew there were years of things to do down there. So I bought them out based on that very early charter scenario, and 1991, and that was starting with another, I think, 5 French boats and me back in those days over that 2-year period. It was really the pioneering time for small boat chartering in the deep south.
And Skip, Nicole, who was on board Vincent, dear Nicole, who is in Germany right now. I spoken with her recently, and we recorded a podcast here. She sent me a few questions that I said, hey, Nicole, I'm going to chat with Skip next week. If you want to make any question to him, feel free to do so. So I have a few curiosities from her. And yeah, I won't be able to make them all, but I've chosen a few. One of them is, what sort of experiences and in life that you haven't had yet, you would still like to achieve? And she was, one of the questions that she asked me was this one.
I think probably my big focus now is to do things with my 2 kids. I've got my daughter's 21. She's in Edinburgh University studying physics, and my son is in Cape Town. He's an elite surfer, and they both sail. But my son is more of a surfer, sailor, and my daughter's gotten into the mountain climbing scene in Scotland in a big way. So my big focus in life now going forward is to spend a lot of time doing things with them, sailing, climbing, all these activities while I'm still able to do it, because I had them pretty late in life. I had Lara at the age of 50, and then Luca followed 18 months later. So I'm still climbing with Lara, and Luca sailed with me last summer for 3 months in Greenland with one of his other mates in Cape Town, and another guy, Tor, one of our crew on Vincent, a young guy who's 25. And my partner, Jennifer, did half the season. So we had 3 months in Greenland together, going all the way from Cape Farewell in the south, all the way up to 78 north, and then back down the Baffin coast. So that was a great thing. And I want to do more of those type of things with them. So that, I would say that's my primary focus. Yeah. With the kids.
I was reading, speaking about one of the trips that you have made with your kids and with your family, I think in 2015, when you guys went to Port LaCroix with the small vessel, and it was super interesting article. She writes, and then you write on your perspective, and it's pretty interesting that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was 2014. That 2014. That was Port LaCroix, the Penguin Post project for the BBC. We were doing a film project and supporting 2 filmmakers down at the base. Because you've been to the base, I think, in Port LaCroix, right? And we were there for like 4 months, on station. So we were seeing the whole life cycle of the Gen 2 penguins, and from haul out to fledging at various times. And so we've done some good things together. And, the kids have cruised with me in Tierra del Fuego and the Falklands. And Lara actually worked as a professional crew during the COVID years down to Marion Island as a crew member on Pelagic Australis. And then 2 trips to Gulf Island. So I've been very lucky because, when you have kids that late, you never know how it's going to go with your own health. Because now I'm 70, I'll be 72 in June, so I'm no spring chicken. But I'm still standing vertical, still upright, and still enthusiastic as ever. And I haven't lost the spirit. I mean, I still have the drive to do these things, and I'm always planning 2 years ahead the next projects. Yeah.
And at some stage you mentioned how you kept fit on board, like doing the mast, lifting one of them on the mast. And that was one way of keeping yourself fit during the trip. I remember you mentioning something like that.
Yeah, well, my philosophy on these boats is, which is very different from most boats of these sizes. Well, certainly the bigger boats, being the Vincent being 77 feet, quite a big boat, is that all the sail control systems are manual. all the winches, all the furlers. There's no push button technology in any of these things. And it's another one of my sort of, quirky things people say is that normally on a boat like that, it would be all electric winches because the loads are enormous, etc. But we've designed the rig, Vincent has 2 masts, so the sail areas are proportionally less. And we'd like to keep it manual for a whole bunch of reasons. And one is, maintenance issues. We can repair these things very easily, less power consumption, etc. And it's a physical boat, and that's how I want to keep it. And that also fits in with our sail training thing for the young people is that, you want to go out there and grind winches and hoist sails manually and get a good workout. What's wrong with that? I mean, this is good. A lot of people look at that as a negative. They say, oh, gee, I'd rather push it. Why don't we have one winch, at least electric? And I say, no, you don't need it. If you're young enough and fit enough, you should be able to sail the boat manually and get out of breath at least a couple times a day. Got to be good for you,
Yeah, I have to say, we didn't actually go to Polaroid. Jerome was sort of running away from any crowded spot, so we skipped Polaroid.
Yeah, not now.
But
the best parts, because he knows where to go to get away from the crowds for sure.
But I can tell you one of the like life dream coming true was first in South Georgia. Was my life dream to go to South Georgia to see the penguin, the colonies and stuff. But also I asked him, if you have a chance, can you hoist me up in the mast? I really want to photograph. And at some stage when we were approaching mainland, he said, Marina, you want to go? It's now or never. So we did, and it was awesome. It was really special moment. Yeah. Another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, so you're very lucky to go with Jerome, because I always consider Jerome to be, the grandfather of this whole Southern Ocean sailing thing. And I always give him credit. And I always say that even the rest of us, like me, who's been there 37 years or whatever it is now, that we're still beginners compared to Jerome. And Dion as well now. Dion has taken over that mantle, and the knowledge base of the Pensées is second to none, for sure.
I will send you a photo I took of you 3 because Dion is photographing you and Jerome like when we were about to leave. I don't know if you remember that, and you were holding him, pretending you're gonna push him overboard, and Dion was photographing. So I did like a paparazzi one. I photographed the 3 of you, and I'll send you on through email.
Yeah.
Skip, what another question from Nicole. What personal wisdom do you want to leave to future generations? She asked.
Well, that's a good one. I think it's some of the things we talked about before already. Think about the technology side. Look at it, every piece of technology with a bit of skepticism, and ask yourself, do you really need this stuff? Because now the way it's going, we got AI, coming up, and it's already here, and the social media side is enormous. Do you really need these things to have a happy life? And start asking a lot of questions and make some experiments in your life about, what can you do without? Because, I've been very lucky to have my kids on the boat on various occasions where we were cut off completely. And they realize, yes, we can actually live well and happy without this flood of social media and instant communication and that type of thing. And unless you make some experiments like this for young people, and I know it's very hard, and I've been very privileged, with boats to be able to go offshore and get cut off, in effect, by necessity, that it's very hard to create the situation. So it's something I worry about a lot for the young people, and you see these things manifested now in the amount of news about mental illness issues in the young today is terrible. So yeah, there's those sort of things. That's one thing, and then I think the other thing is to not neglect your physical side of life, and really try to stay fit and healthy and struggle. I have a couple really other quirky things I have to tell you about. Is that I refuse to have any. This is really weird. I refuse to have any wheels on my luggage and bags. Like, you see these people in the airports. Everybody's got wheels, and I don't have wheels. And I like to struggle carrying bags. This is really strange. Throwing a big bag over my shoulder and walking through the airport, and I actually enjoy that. And the other thing is, if I'm faced with a set of stairs or an elevator or an escalator, I'll take the stairs. Absolutely. And if I'm on an escalator, I walk up and down the escalator. What really drives me crazy is people standing on an escalator going down, and they don't have the ambition to walk down the escalator. And you feel like pushing them over, I get out of the way, So, and people become so lazy with all these conveniences. And this is, it manifests itself in, obesity, in lack of ability, this type of thing. So I'm sort of a throwback to, in the old days when people they were working outside the whole time. They were a lot fitter by necessity. And we have so many conveniences around us, making life easier, that it's become a negative for me anyway. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I try normally in the subway. I always try to not choose the electronic. What do you call escalators?
What do you call it?
I forgot the word. Anyway, I try to go by foot, like walking up and down. I try to run those. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. That's it's one of those things that the more you force yourself to do these things, the fitter you're going to be. Otherwise, you will go downhill physically. if you're not of a person who's working outside all the time and you stay fit like that. But in an urban area, you don't have a lot of chance to do these things unless you really look for them. Yeah.
Talking about your mountaineering. Yeah, mountaineering. That's a hard word for me to say. I have to say I struggle. Mountaineering. When did it start? When you start living in Europe, or how did that start in your life? I was curious about that.
Yeah, the mountaineering side, and I'm not a professional mountaineer. I'm an amateur and capable in most things. Rock climbing, snow and ice climbing, ski mountaineering. That started when I came to Europe. So I started at a very late age, when I was 24, 25. Most people who, begin in their teens, like my daughter, and started rock climbing in the UK, and then climbing in the Alps. And then, of course, once I had this opportunity to build Pelagic and sail down to Antarctica and South Georgia, then this was the icing on the cake of being able to climb and ski in these remote areas where you had to arrive by boat. And that was one of the reasons I got involved in building Pelagic, was to go to these places and do that type of thing. And one thing led to the other. And then, every year there was another expedition that wanted to go climbing, and we hosted them. So, I was actually making money taking these people down, and I was always invited to come along on the climbing team. So, yeah, I spent many years on the peninsula in South Georgia doing this type of stuff, and still doing it. We're off in September this year again. Stephen Venables and I, who's a very celebrated climber in the UK, we have a partnership, and we do these trips together, guiding client groups, some who are, much far superior climbers than we are, at least me, and other times not, where we're more in a guiding situation, and otherwise just going along with them climbing. So yeah, that's a big feature for me, that we try to do at least one or two of those trips every year. A big part of the Pelagic story was that the adventure side. Yeah.
So I have a very good friend and listener of the podcast. His name is João Paulo Barbosa. He also climbs, and he travels normally on board Kotiki with Igor. Igobelli.
All right. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
He's a brilliant photographer. He makes beautiful images. And he sent me a question for you because I said, okay, João, shoot one. And he said, he asked me to if you could comment on the trip when you took Alex Lowy and Konrad Anker to climb in the peninsula. He was curious about that trip that you made. I don't know exactly which year, but he'd like to listen a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was Alex Lowe, not Conrad. Conrad wasn't on that trip, but that was Alex Lowe, and we got Alex Lowe involved in that trip because I had an idea to sort of copy a project that was done by Robin Knox Johnson and Chris Bonington, a famous British climber and a famous sailor. They went to Greenland, I think in the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s, and they did a sailing climbing trip. And it was a case of, the climber putting the sailor out of his comfort zone, trying to climb a mountain, somebody who's never done it before, and then vice versa, Knox Johnson putting Bonington out of his comfort zone, crossing over to Greenland from the UK. So this was a nice idea. So I tried to do the same thing with Gary Jobson, who's a famous sailor in America, and I had to get a climber and had to be American because we were doing an ESPN special for this one. And I found Alex through the network. I knew who he was, obviously, but then I made contact with him and he agreed to go. And we did this amazing trip, spent a month on the peninsula, mainly making a film in that same vein. The best part of the whole thing for me is that Alex and I, the rest of the film team needed a day off because they were tired and all the rest of it. And Alex, who's never tired, was never tired. He says, let's go, look at that, look at Mount Scott over there. Look at that line on Mount Scott. Let's go and climb that thing while these guys are taking a day off. So we had this amazing, did a new route on Mount Scott, just Alex and I. And it was the best part of the whole project for me. No film involved, just he and I. And it was, I'll never forget it. And, we had a lot of plans after that because he really enjoyed being on the boat. And of course, our concept of Gary putting Alex out of his comfort zone didn't work at all because Alex had never sort of been on a boat before, but he's one of these guys who immediately figured out how to put a line around a winch the right way. He climbed up the mast hand over hand, going out the Beagle Channel and sat on top of the masthead, broke the windows, by the way, but I didn't mind. And he was totally at home on the boat, never got seasick. So the film didn't actually work very well because we couldn't actually make him look awkward at any point in time. And then, we had a lot of plans after that. We wanted to do South Georgia together. And we were planning the next trip on the boat. And then sadly, he died in the Himalayas and the avalanche. Conrad was with him. Conrad survived. Alex died. Yeah, so that was a pity. Yeah, we've had quite a lot of famous climbers on the boat over the years, and two more of them did sadly die later on their other mountaineering activities. Chantal Mauduit, who is a very famous French alpinist, she was trying to climb all the 8,000-meter peaks, and she did a trip with us in the 90s as well, and she got avalanched on Dhaulagiri in Nepal some years later. And then Erhard Loratan from Switzerland was with us on a Tierra del Fuego trip, trying to climb Mount Sarmiento. We failed on that one, and he died in a very freak accident in the Swiss Alps with his girlfriend. And they fell off a ridge. So we've had some very very accomplished climbers with us over the years. 3 died, and many more still alive. So yeah.
One thing that I was curious to ask you, Skip, because you are dealing with a region talking about the higher latitudes, the further south, when you go down to South Georgia, Antarctica, and so on. You are likely to experience some bad weather conditions, and you have a plan, right? You have a goal, a track. You're gonna try to do that, but it's open to possibilities that you don't do it in the end. How do you deal with the anxious guests that you have on board to overcome probably their frustrations, because you have probably an easier mindset to deal with, so because you know you can come back, you can have another possibility. But do you have experiences struggling with those people that you couldn't do what was planned due to bad weather?
Yeah, that occasionally happens where we can't do exactly what we wanted to do, and that's made clear when we make these arrangements for the trip, that there is uncertainty in the mix, and part of I think, interestingly, the uncertainty is part of the attraction, and we're actually selling uncertainty, if you will. Is that, well, not everything is possible down there because of weather, because of ice conditions on any one year, and a lot of other factors. Things go wrong, not least of all, you could have a problem with the boat as well, which luckily we've had very little problems where the boat actually, interfered with a project, but technically. But everybody, they do accept that. And, if you can't do one thing, you can do something else. So it's not a case of total failure where you can't cross the Drake Passage and you never make it to Antarctica. We always get down there. We always get to South Georgia. But once you're, on site, maybe you won't be able to get to Marguerite Bay, or you won't be able to get into Crystal Sound, and maybe only as far as Vernadsky, or that type of thing. In South Georgia, the same. You try to do a mountaineering trip, and you don't get to the summit because you never had the weather. We've had probably, I would say, more failures in the mountains, not summiting, than successes, just because South Georgia is so difficult. So yeah, I mean, that's part of the deal, and we've never had people come back to us complaining about that. And for example, we did the science trip now just passed in November, December. It was a 5-week trip for British Antarctic Survey, the goal being to get to Zavadovsky Island in the South Sandwich, get on shore like we did last January when Nicole was on board, and she was on board with us again this year. And we spent most of the time dodging weather in the South Sandwich. There was an enormous low, 939 millibars, and we had to go around the backside of it, go all the way to South Thule, and then back up the chain. And in the end, we only spent 7 days on Zavadovsky out of a 5-week charter to get the science in. So, yeah, you could say, geez, is that cost effective? Yeah, you start asking your questions. But in the end, we did get the science in just what they had to do, counting penguins and mapping and terrestrial biology, etc. But, in the end of the day, it's the only way to get to these places. You can't mount a campaign like that with the Sir David Attenborough or the Polar Stern or any big ship. It just doesn't work. We're the only show in town. So if you want to do science on the South Sandwich, it's small boats, and it's some of the roughest weather in the world, sea conditions. So you have to accept that. And so yeah, this does come into it. But I have to say, it's never been a concern from the beginning. People know the risks, they know the uncertainties, and they buy into that.
I just remember now, Skip, when Nicole was saying when you guys were on the island, when you managed to, because landing on Zavadovsky is quite tricky, right? You have a pretty logistic work to be able to stay on the island, to set the camp. And she was mentioning about the pasta with niente. She was mentioning on the menu at some stage.
Pasta con niente. That's just simple pasta with olive oil, garlic, and some chilies. I mean, that's now that was cooking on the island. I was the cook in the tent there. So yeah, with it was Nicole and Tom Hart from Oxford. Yeah, we had a fun time. And yeah, I mean, Zavadovsky, that was one of the most difficult landings. I've landed on 4 other islands in the South Sandwich because we were there in 2020 as well. So I've been there 3 times now. And Zavadovsky was the tough one. And that landing place we landed on the cliff there was going back to Jerome again. That Jerome found that landing place. And it's this weird little tiny cliff headland where you have surge sort of cancels each other out. So even if it's rough off the coast, the surge sort of negates itself as it comes from both directions, and you have a sort of a calm patch that just persists. And the water's going up and down, heaving up and down by, a meter and a half all the time.
Wow.
But it's doable to get off. And, and that's the only place really that you can land and be guaranteed to get ashore and guaranteed at some point to get off. So that was, it was quite committing, because we had to haul up, I think, 70 or 80 pieces of kit, in pelly cases and barrels and bags to sustain ourselves for, 3 weeks. A lot of reserve, had to haul up the water because water's not abundantly in supply there, fuel for the generators to charge the batteries for the drone flying. So it was a big operation. So we've been there twice now camping. And I'd go again. I've got it all figured out now. Every time you go, you learn more of what to do, what not to do. And so we're waiting, hopefully, for the next science project to come along to fund, further research on Zawodowski. And I'd love to be involved. Yeah.
The other trip, the following trip that you went towards South Georgia, again with Dion and Sally, and I think it was for the British Antarctic Survey, if I'm not wrong. And they did they find evidences about avian flu, Skip? How is the situation since that trip happened with you all?
Yeah, we just finished that trip end of February, and that was for actually the South Georgia government in conjunction with the Antarctic Research Trust in Switzerland. They paid 50-50. And the main goal of that, and this was sort of organized well before the avian flu thing manifested itself, the main goal was to do the wandering albatross census, which is a once every 10-year cycle. Sally did, and Dion did that in 2015, the last time. So the government hired us to do this census, and it's all part of the Antarctic Treaties, ACAP committee, which is a conservation of Antarctic petrels and albatross thing. Sort of, you have to sort of monitor these populations. So, we got hired to do that. And of course, that was our main goal. And Sally, being the expert of the albatross on South Georgia, she studied this for, half a century or something. And of course, all these landing sites were mainly on the south coast of these very obscure places, quite difficult to land with the swell coming in, going Anakoff Island and these places, which nobody goes to because it's all restricted areas. Dion's expertise was, unbelievable. He's got the tracks of all these places in uncharted waters. So that was the main goal, which we did. But the secondary goal was monitoring the avian flu, which did hit South Georgia this year, and quite dramatic in some places and not so dramatic in other places. But the big mortality events were mainly young elephant seals and male fur seals have got hit the hardest, not the birds so much. We did see some, dead skuas and a few dead penguins, not many. I mean, most of the penguins were standing upright, seemed to be doing fine, but the marine mammals got hit very hard, as they did in South America, as the bird flu came down South American continent, down to Tierra del Fuego, and then eventually across to South Georgia with migratory birds, mainly skuas, they think skuas and gulls. So, we were going on all the beaches, all the visitor site beaches as well on the north side that the tourist ships go to, which were all closed this year, barring a few, and just recording how many dead animals and what it looked like, and the whole sort of by people who know what they're looking for, who've been there many times. So you go to one beach, if you didn't know about the bird flu, a few of the places we landed on looked totally normal, and there was a few dead seals, few dead birds, but there's always dead something on these beaches because there's so many of these things, and things die for all sorts of reasons. Where other beaches, mainly on the southern half of the island, were pretty devastating. Hundreds of dead seals washed up on a tide line. So it was pretty grisly. So we did that. That was a 6-week charter. I mean, fantastic trip, with Dion and Sally and 5 researchers and 5 crew. It was real nice, and had very good weather, unlike the Zawodowski trip did before. We had pretty good conditions where we could move around at will up and down the south coast and north coast. Yeah, great trip.
Skip, talking about your passion for reading, because you mentioned in the beginning of our chat how much you appreciated reading and how that stimulated you to traveling and to do what you do now. Do you feel the same way about writing?
Yeah, well, I've written quite a lot in my sailing career over many years about my around the world races. I've written 2 books on that, about 1985 Whitbread race on drum with Simon Laban and Duran Duran. That was called One Watch at a Time. And then I wrote another book in 1990 on the 89-90 Whitbread race on Fazisi, the Soviet entry that I skippered, called Fazisi, the Joint Venture. So I've written two books that are quite long ago now. But in the meantime, I've written a lot of articles over the years, and I've been doing in fact, a monthly column for Yachting World magazine, the British, preeminent yachting magazine. And I just retired from that last year, and I'm actually publishing a book in another month's time, which is a collation of those 101 articles put together. I thought it was a nice, convenient thing to do and close the loop on it. And it's called Skip Novak on Sailing, and it's just these 101 articles with some postscripts on the end of many of them, because looking back over years, quite often there's things to add to what I had said, and maybe I've changed my mind on a few things, or I was dead wrong on others. So there's the articles as they were published, and some additions, and then there's a nice introduction by Sir Robin Knox Johnson. And it's up on Amazon now, pre-order, and we're going to start working the social media platforms to try to sell the books, because a lot of people have read some of the articles, because you pick up a Yachting World and there it is, but most people have never read the whole lot together. So this is a way to present the whole 101 articles under one cover. So yeah.
And you mentioned the subtitle "Words of Wisdom from 50 Years Afloat." Can you share any of those words briefly with us?
Well, yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that during the main interview, but yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with looking very closely at technology and taking things that you really do need out of everything that's on offer and not go overboard, because with technology, even though it brings many pluses to our life, there's always a negative every time you add another layer to it. So that's something to be aware of. And also things about like learning. I dwelled a little bit on learning how to sail, and what keeps people interested in sailing when they start out in, dinghies, and how to keep the interest up through a lifelong thing where you don't drop out because you just lost interest in sailing. And there's usually a reason for dropping out. And there's a few things about that. And quite a lot about safety issues, and my philosophies on safety are quite particular in the fact that I think we've gone overboard on too many safety issues, talking about it too much equipment generally, and sort of losing the plot of what it means to be free on the ocean. Now we're encumbered with so many contraptions that if you go overboard and not clip down, you will probably go to the bottom due to the weight of it all. But that's a tricky subject, because of course there has been loss of life on cruising, racing, etc. But there is a limit to how much you have to be. It's almost being obsessive about these things today. So yeah, I've got quite a few particular opinions about these things, and a few technical things of how to rig boats and what's important in yacht design, what's important in managing boats with crews, and it's a whole collection of stuff. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting. It's not a book you would read cover to cover in one go, but you'd pick it up every now and again. So it's convenient to have it on your boat or on your nightstand read a few articles, and it's divided up into sections, into 7 chapters, sort of according to subject. So yeah, it was a nice thing to do. Yeah.
So it's already available, you mentioned, to pre-order Amazon. Are you planning any physical release, like in-person events?
That I'm not sure about. I've got to talk to the publisher about that, how that's going to work, because it's being, released in, I think on May 9th in the UK and in July in the States. And I'm not sure exactly what we're doing in person. I think, today, a lot of this stuff now, there's less in-person sort of functions, and it's more sort of, working the online systems, probably getting this thing out. So yeah, don't know yet.
So keep us posted, please. And it will be a great pleasure to see you, perhaps in Italy or anywhere else in the world. Let us know.
Sure.
We'll be happy to share too.
Okay, you bet.
Do you have time for 2 more questions? Are you okay with your time?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Normally I do these last minutes of the podcast for the supporter, listen partners, and just to sort of work with the financial sustainability of the podcast. So it's a strategy.
I know how it works. Yeah, you got to do it. Yeah,
you got to do it. That's right. So the first one is about the medal, because you were awarded with the medal, Tillman's medal in 2016, right?
Yeah, I think that was 2016. Yeah, that's the Royal
How
Cruising.
was it for you? Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening to this chat. If you want to check out the entire conversation, have a look at the link in the description of this episode. Basically, you have to subscribe directly on YouTube for a very, very small monthly fee. By subscribing, you can get access to all previously recorded chats, and you can check out the next one always one day earlier. That's it for now. I see you all in the next episode, and until then, fair winds to all of you. Muito obrigada para você que chegou até aqui em mais um episódio do canal. E olha só que beleza! Ah, que alívio poder falar sem vontade de tossir ou engasgar. Que beleza! A voz fluindo muito melhor. E agora então eu dou um recado final. Se você quiser conferir esse bate-papo completo, dá uma olhadinha no site podcastmariasonora.com na seção Apoie. Lá você vai ver que pode fazer uma contribuição através do Pix, ser um assinante através do Apoia-se ou então diretamente no YouTube. Sendo um assinante, você confere todos os bate-papos completos já lançados e os próximos antecipadamente. Isso mesmo! Aproveitar o seu sábado desfrutando de uma conversa inspiradora. A gente se vê então no próximo programa e eu desejo a todos vocês bons ventos.